I'm 22 years old, and this incident happened to me a year and a half ago. I just moved into my first apartment and was still in the process of moving in. The door that leads into my apartment locks itself automatically when closed, so I was going to the entrance of the apartment complex to get my mail while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening the mail and still on the phone. I accidentally dropped the phone on the floor. It landed under the bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch out for it. I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream. The person under my bed was lying still with his back towards me and his head in his chest, so I couldn't see his face, and he didn't see me. Trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head, I picked up the phone and said, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm just gonna take a shower, and I'll call you back." The bathroom is right by my bed, so I hastily walked in and quietly locked the door, turned my shower on, and jumped out my window. My apartment is on the first floor. I called the police and they told me to wait nearby, but to go across the street and see if anyone comes out of the door. This was during the summer and it was still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend and he came just before the police. I gave them the keys and they went inside. Only moments later, two cops came out holding a thin, tired-looking man. His eyes looked absolutely crazy, but he didn't even try to get away. The policeman that stood beside me and comforted me while the other cops searched through my house told me that the man stood outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives waiting for me to come out. This man somehow crept in my entry door while I was getting my mail and hid under my bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless person and was placed in a mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day.
My name is Aditi. I have my best friend who is extremely close to me since she has now moved in with me and my family. For your information, she is 7 years older than me. She grew up in a small town, and a lot of murders and gruesome incidents occurred there. One of the scary incidents that she told me still causes me to send shivers down my spine. So this happened to her when she was 11 years old. There was a young, kind, and extremely beautiful woman in her town who was happily married to her husband. They lived in conjugal harmony, but there was something, a dark secret that she was hiding. The woman, who we'll refer to as Veronica, had a child, and that baby was not her husband's. She couldn't let her husband know about this, as this baby was the result of one of her old affairs. She was 8 years old then, and has been living at one of her friend's houses. Veronica used to visit her friend's house to meet her child secretly every night after her husband fell into sleep. However, when her husband had returned home late from work one day, then he realized that his wife wasn't home. Worried, he started looking for Veronica desperately. He had continued searching everywhere in town until he decided to check at her friend's house. When he finally arrived at her house, he noticed Veronica talking and laughing with a child. Wondering who the girl was, he stood behind a tree and started to eavesdrop on their conversation. And when he heard every conversation between them, then he ended up realizing that his wife cheated on him, got pregnant, and even gave birth, who was not his baby. This pissed him off enough, so he eventually created the most horrifying plan. One night, he put sleeping pills in her coffee, which caused her to sleep for 12 hours. Eventually, Veronica could not meet her child that evening, and he snuck into her friend's house to kidnap the child. After kidnapping her, then he took her to a dense forest. She was crying. Then he smiled the creepiest way and said, "You are going to meet your mommy." She continued crying and tried to escape, but she couldn't get out, as she was buried from head to toe in soil. She was never seen after that. A week later, her body was found in the ground, and this made Veronica deeply shocked. And it turned out that her husband had actually dug a hole and threw her in. He soon arrested by police and was finally sentenced for his crime. However, Veronica couldn't get out of the grief for her lost child and ended up falling sick in bed for a long time. It has been 9 years since this happened, but he still remains in jail.
One rainy day when I was driving home, I came across this man who was walking. As I'm approaching him, I debate with myself if I should give this man a ride or not. It can be dangerous because you never know what can happen, but in the end I decided to stop and ask him if he needed a ride. When I stopped, I looked at him and my first thought is, poor man, soaking wet, dirty clothes, and with a face of someone that just lost everything. So I asked him, "Can I give you a ride, sir?" Which he replies, "A ride downtown will be appreciated." I told him of course, and he got inside. When he entered the car, he didn't say a word. I tried making small talk, but he wasn't answering. He just sat there looking into the void. After a few minutes, I asked him if he wanted to eat something. It was late in the night, but I could pass my house and make something for this man. I had established at this point that this man wasn't dangerous at all. He looked skinny and frail. The man answered, "Yes, please. I haven't eaten in a few days." It didn't surprise me. I told him I would prepare something to eat, then I would arrange a place for him to sleep. When we arrived, I took the man to the kitchen. I told him to sit down and I would prepare something for us to eat. He sat down and I went into the fridge and I saw what I could do for the both of us. I was actually hungry too. But when I looked back to check the guy again, he was already gone. I couldn't find him anywhere. I had checked everywhere except in my basement. Usually my basement door is always locked, but for some reason this time it wasn't. So I made my way down the stairs and I see him standing in the middle of my floor, looking at me at the bottom of the stairs. I approached him slowly. Couldn't see his eyes, but he held an aggressive posture facing me. He then says, "It was you." "I don't understand," I said. At that moment, he shows me a necklace and says, "This was my wife's, and I found it here. It took me a long time, but I finally caught you." He draws out a knife from his pocket and he tries to slash my neck. He missed by inches but made me fall back. Once on the ground, I took my concealed handgun and I shot him twice in the chest. He fell to the ground. I got up and I shot him one more time just to make sure. And then I tell myself, I need to be more careful. You see, the thing is, I've done some messed up things in my past and this guy pretty much caught me. I guess I robbed his wife or something, but I couldn't let that situation unfold. I'm not going back to jail.
My name is Melanie. This happened when I was 6 years old. In 1989, I lived in San Bernardino, California. One night, after watching my favorite TV show, I decided to sleep with my mom. I used to sleep alone, but somehow I went to her bed and she smiled at me. While I was sleeping with her, I had a dream that I was at a park. It was sunny, and there were a lot of big trees around. I was in the car and my mom was standing on the corner of the sidewalk. I struggled to open the door, but it didn't open at all. As I was pounding on the back of the car window, crying for her to help me, she just stood there, smiling and waving to me. Then I woke up, crying hysterically. Mom also woke up and rubbed my back, asking what was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to repeat the horrible dream. Nothing. I told her and fell back asleep without any more bad dreams that night. After a year, we moved to Las Vegas, and I was getting ready to turn 7 in a couple of weeks. My older brother, sister, and I went to the airport to visit my aunt who lives in Washington for a while. After finishing check-in, we went through security and got ready to board the plane. When I looked back at my mom, she was smiling and waving at me. It was the same way as in my dream. I couldn't dismiss the weird feeling during the flight. But despite the anxiety, we eventually arrived at my aunt's house peacefully. We were about to have a big party since my birthday was coming. And on my birthday, my mom called to greet me and said that she loves me. That was the last time I ever heard her speak. Everything was alright. I was so happy at the time. I was waiting for my mom to come over here and spend time with us. A few days later, my uncle told us to sit down in the living room, as he had something very important to tell us. I noticed that my older sister was sitting in the corner chair and was crying quietly. He proceeded to tell us that my mother was no longer with us. At first, I couldn't understand what he was saying. He then told us that she died from a car accident. There was nothing more devastating than that day. Everybody in the living room was crying with such piercing sadness. Now I've grown up, but I still have dreams of my mom smiling and waving at me. I hope this story urges whoever is watching this video to cherish your loved ones, because it could be the last day you see or speak to them.
My name is Kai, and this incident happened in England when I was about 10 years old. It shocked everybody, as the crime rate where this happened was slim to none. Anyways, let's get into the story. It was a snowy December day, about 1 or 2 days until the Christmas break, so everybody was getting hyper. We didn't really do any work, so me and my 5 friends were talking and whatnot. But then my teacher, Mrs. J, got a text from the principal that a maniac entered the school with a machete, hoping to get some kills. Even though we really didn't do lockdown drills, we were smarter than your run-of-the-mill year 6s, so we quickly turned off the lights, closed the windows, and locked the doors, and armed ourselves with sharp pencils. And I mean very sharp pencils. We were all sitting in the dark waiting for the lockdown to end, but unluckily for us, it didn't. Around 10 minutes into the lockdown, we heard the screams of a woman, a loud stomping near the stairs, and she was singing, "Die, die, die. I'll stab you till you die. Die, die, die. I hope you don't survive." At this point, at least half of the class was crying, and the rest of us were barely keeping it together. At around 15 minutes into the lockdown, the mentally unstable woman stomped up the stairs. This was bad news, as we were the closest upstairs classroom to the stairs. And at this point, Mrs. J passed out. So we were fucked. As we were the closest upstairs classroom to the stairs, the woman tried to smash the door's window so she could attempt to kill the 23 kids. The other 7 were absent, without an adult to protect them. To our horror, she succeeded, and she managed to unlock the door from the outside, and she was now in the room. And she had the most widest and creepiest smile on the planet. Of course, thanks to my luck, she struck me, cutting open my leg. Thanks to the amount of blood pouring out from the side of my leg, I was on the brink of passing out. And I should count my lucky stars that my friends had the guts to fight her, and I might say they managed to knock her out and restrain her. The police arrived and arrested her, and I was transported to the hospital, and I had the worst Christmas break of my life. Turns out the woman had stabbed some of my classmates too, and they were sent to the hospital. Luckily, we all survived. The woman was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The biggest twist of all was that Mrs. J was friends with the woman, and she helped her so she could kill us. That explains why Mrs. J passed out and why our class was targeted. Mrs. J was sentenced to 15 years in prison.
"It's safe to come out now, sweetie," Dad said reassuringly, his blue eyes shining at me through the gap in the bedroom door. He's been saying that for hours, but it doesn't change the fact that my dad's eyes are green.
For the past year or so, my life had been filled with misfortune. My boss fired me from my job after a small accident. And just like that, I lost my only source of income. After that happened, I began to feel extremely lost in life. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't predict what was in store for me, so I decided to find out. Hoping for some sort of miracle, I visited a small little psychic shop on the side of the road. A bell rang as I opened the door leading to the shop, and the smell of burning candles entered my lungs. "Welcome, dear customer," a voice shouted from afar. Looking over, a woman with silver hair and hazel skin appeared before me, with a sinister smile decorating her face. Something felt unusual about her, but I guess that was just part of her psychic gimmick. "I take it you're here for a reading. Please take a seat," the woman insisted as she led me to a table with the crystal ball placed in the middle. My first impression of her was that she was definitely not completely sane, but since I was already there, it wouldn't hurt to see what she had to say. I asked her what she saw in store for me, and then she pressed her face extremely close to her crystal ball. "In your near future, you should stay away from other women," she claims, as if she had actually seen something in her crystal ball. I waited, as if I had expected her to say something more, but the only thing that came out of her mouth was, "You may leave now." I knew it was a scam from the beginning, but I had at least expected her to give me a little false hope. "Thanks for nothing," I grumbled as I paid her. She only smiled back at me. "You'll be back. They always come back." While waiting at the bus stop, I scolded myself for believing in something so fake. Sitting on a bench in front of the bus stop was a woman. I recalled what the psychic had told me about women, and oddly enough, I decided to not sit next to her. Just minutes later, another person arrived and took the seat next to her. I watched them out of the corner of my eye, but nothing seemed to happen. I rolled my eyes, questioning why I ever believed such a made-up fortune. The woman spilled coffee all over the man next to her. I was shocked. Was the psychic real? Or was this just a coincidence? Shaking my head, I took one look back at the woman, and deep down I knew what my answer was. With that, I walked back to the psychic's shack. Before I could even knock, she opened the door and smiled at me. "I told you so, didn't I?" We took a seat back at her table, and she told me another fortune using her crystal ball. "You should walk home today." I sat in front of her dumbfounded, but she just gave me a look that said, "I tell no lies." Grumbling, I paid her once again and walked out. It was chilly outside, which made it extremely tempting to just wait at a bus stop. Instead, I listened to her words and continued to push through the terrible weather. After walking for about half an hour, I was cursing the psychic. What happened at the bus stop was definitely just a coincidence, and what I was doing now was just foolish. Passing by a dark alleyway, I heard a scream. Biting my lip, I used my phone flashlight to uncover the darkness. My phone revealed a man getting robbed before my very eyes. I thought quickly and just started hitting the thief with my bag, until he thought the man's belongings weren't worth it and just took off. While catching his breath, the man thanked me. I still couldn't figure out why the psychic asked me to walk home, until I saw the man's face. In shock, I recognized him as my old boss. I guess he felt grateful for me, or maybe he just pitied me. But he ended up giving my job back after we talked for a bit. I was enthusiastic. After that, I returned back to the psychic almost every day. The strange woman told me the secrets on how to become successful, and slowly she became my secret weapon. Then one day, she asked me to do an unusual task. Go to this address, and make sure the person who sleeps there never wakes up again. After all the good fortune the psychic had given me, I felt like I was compelled to do it. She was basically asking me to commit a crime. But this was the sort of crime that could never be forgiven. I was hesitant, but the psychic had never given me bad advice ever. Following my gut, I left, deciding to follow her words. That night, I returned home with blood all over my body. I found police waiting for me at my doorstep. The first thought that went through my mind was that the psychic definitely snitched on me. I screamed and shouted at the men as they dragged me away, telling them the stories of the psychic who had tricked me. The police officers looked at each other strangely. Finally, one of them spoke up. There isn't a psychic shack on the side of the road. It's an abandoned church.
This tragic incident happened 3 years ago. I need to explain my family first to help you understand my story. I used to live with my dad, mom, and older brother. Since I was young, my dad always fought with my mom, so my brother and I always spent the night shivering in fear. My mom was full of bruises and scars from being beaten by dad, and there were many times when her life was almost in danger. 3 years ago, it was when I was 17. Being a grown-up, we were already used to Dad's violence. Whenever he got violent, I screamed and threw myself to stop him, but it didn't always stop so easily. My brother would just quietly get out of the house. I understood him. There was really no way to stop our dad. It was the same day as usual. That night as well, my dad threw liquor bottles and cursed at us. He wielded the knife like he was really going to kill us, and my mom got cut and bled while protecting us. I was crying with fear. Then someone knocked on the door outside.
Piss off, you son of a bitch!
My dad shouted. However, the knocking continued. My dad ended up opening the door in anger. To our surprise, a man in a clown costume and mask stood outside. My dad yelled and cursed at the man to get away, but the clown stood there still.
Who the fuck are you?
My dad cursed at him for a long time and turned around. Just then, the moment he turned around, the clown hit his head with a hammer from behind. Dad fell down on the floor and ended up dead while convulsing. And then I heard a sobbing sound. The clown was sobbing, shaking his shoulders like crazy, and walked away. After a while, the police who received the report rushed to the scene and quickly caught the clown. And the moment they unmasked the clown, I collapsed to the floor. I was in a breathtaking shock on the spot. It was my brother. Although tears were flowing from his eyes, I could see he was smiling. He kept muttering as he was arrested by the police.
It's all over now. It's alright. It's alright.
To this day, I am unable to forget about that day. I just live in the nightmare. But I never blame him at all. He just wanted to end this hell.
This story is about an incident that happened at a high school where one of my friends used to attend. There was a close senior in the high school where my friend goes, and she was famous for her beautiful looks, high intelligence, and especially good at drawing. Then she eventually fell in love with her art teacher at school. She started to like her teacher, and he refused her love confession at first, considering their status and the difference in age. However, at some point, the two soon became a lover. Then later he started to love her intensely. They seemed to get along well with each other, but as she graduated from high school and went to college, she became more and more tired of him, who was much older than her. She gradually started to hang out with several boys of her age, and soon became going out with a man from a blind date. She ended up saying farewell to the teacher, but he, who was still in love with her, was even thinking about getting married. When she coldly informed him to break up, he clung to her and begged, but her attitude was constant as itself. "No, I think we are like oil and water, and I'm with someone else now, so let's just break up." He realized that it was meaningless no matter how much he begged. He ended up quitting contacting her as if he had given up and was not showing up in front of her for a while. After a few weeks, she got a phone call from him while she was staying alone in her home at that time. "Why did you call me? Don't ever try to contact me again." When she was about to hang up, he replied calmly, "Wait, I need to show you one last thing before we break up." He said like this and then asked her to come out to the front door just for a moment. She got a weird feeling and refused at first, saying that she didn't want to go out, but he insisted that he would wait until she came out and then hung up. Being scared, she called her boyfriend and asked him to come home, and she was waiting in her house for a while. Not long after, he called back, but something he said was strange. "Babe, don't come out of your house. Not a single step." Getting frightened by his urgent words, she was staying at home in fear, and soon after she heard a sudden siren and people talking noisily outside. Her boyfriend soon came to her house and said, "When I arrived at your apartment hurriedly after I got your call, I saw him. He hanged himself in the hallway of your apartment." It turned out that the teacher, who was suffering great misery by her, who no longer loved him, called her in front of the front door of her house, told her to come out, and eventually committed suicide with his neck hanging in the hallway. "The reason I died is because of you." He wanted to show her his last look like that. If she listened to him and walked out of the door, she would have seen him hanging in the hallway from the front door as soon as she opened the door. This incident was eventually put in our local newspaper, and I think it was the most terrible happening in many ways. It was around the time that our area was plagued by lots of sexual assault cases. And there was advice for us, which used to be that if someone followed you, look straight at his eyes and talk. Then one day, I was coming back home after hanging out with my friend. I saw a middle-aged man walking behind me, and suddenly I felt like he was following me. And he literally came to my apartment elevator. So I turned around intentionally and greeted him, smiling. "Hello." He pretended not to hear me at first, so I spoke to him, making eye contact with him more and more. "I think I've never seen you in this apartment before. Did you move here?" He, this time, looked at me with his eyes wide open, and then ran away from the spot, and I rushed towards the security office to report what I had experienced just before. And the moment when I saw the CCTV there, I had no choice but to just freeze in there. I was talking to myself, staring into the air.
My 2-year-old is always staring at me. I smile at him to make him laugh and wish the rest of my family could still see me too. It's childish, but when I leave the basement, I always run up the stairs while glancing behind me. I was looking in the wrong direction.
This happened 3 months ago when I was walking to work. I saw a car stop by me and the window opened, and there was a guy with a cracked face and a very creepy smile in a limo car. And then he said to me, "Oh, looks like you want to go to work. Well, hop into my car so you can arrive faster." And then I said, "No thank you," and he laughed. At the office, when it was time to go home, I chose the elevator so I could get down to the main floor faster. When the elevator opened, I saw the guy I had seen earlier with the cracked face and creepy smile. He was in the elevator with the other employees, and then he said, "Come on in, there's still room for you." And then I said, "No thank you," and instead chose the stairs. When I got downstairs, I heard a scream. So I quickly went down the rest of the stairs, and then I saw the elevator full of blood and dead bodies. I was scared and quickly called 911 and told them what happened, and then I realized that the guy with the cracked face was gone. After that incident happened, I never ever worked at that place again. What would have happened if I'd gone in the elevator or hopped in his car? At least I'm still alive.
One of the employees was preparing to close the ride in the amusement park. Then he saw two people coming in. "I guess you guys are the last." The staff led them to their seats, and the two, who appeared to be a couple, sat in a friendly atmosphere and said, "Oh, we are celebrating our 100th day anniversary." "Congratulations! What kind of anniversary is it? Date?" Operating the ride, he also said pleasingly, and at that moment when he turned around, the woman said to him, "No, the anniversary of our death." He immediately got goosebumps and blankly looked back at the place where the ride left. What kind of prank is that? However, to his surprise, there was no one on the ride when it came back. And when he checked the CCTV again, he only saw himself staring into the air, greeting and talking to himself, and operating the ride.